What's going on, guys? It's Nick here, back with another video. Today we'll be going over my 5 favorite rookie wide receivers to target in redraft leagues and taking their ADPs into account. So I'm not just going to list my 5 favorite rookie wide receivers like in order of where I would take them. We're going to be looking at ADPs, say who I think the 5 best values are. I have on the screen right now what ADPs I'm using, just so we're on the same page. Different sites have different ADPs. What I have on the screen is what I'll use for this video. But for those of you listening on the podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, top 15 are Drake London as wide receiver 33, Treylon Burks, wide receiver 35, Skyy Moore, wide receiver 40, Chris Olave, 43, Garrett Wilson, 44, Christian Watson, 46, Jameson Williams, 54, Jahan Dotson, 62, David Bell at 69, Alec Pierce at 73, Jalen Tolbert, 79, John Mechie, 80, Wan'Dale Robinson, 88, Romeo Doubs, 94, and Velus Jones Jr., 97. Basically, I would say, though, anyone after, I don't know, I'd say like Alex Pierce. Well, once you get into like the wide receiver 70 kind of range, I'm just going to treat all those guys as the last pick, right? There's really no difference between the wide receiver like 80 and 120. Whatever the range is there, that's your last pick. So that's what I'm going to say. I'm not going to say that someone is some insane value is like the 150th best wide receiver. They should be 120. It doesn't matter what that is. That's your last pick. So I'm treating all those guys the same. So who do I think the 5 best values are? Right now, I have Drake London and Treylon Burks both projected exactly at their ADP or within like one spot of it, basically being perfectly valued right now. So neither of them screams value to me, but I did want to include one of them because those two are by far the most likely to produce high-end numbers this season. And so I kind of want to pick which one I would say my favorite is. And they're also going like right next to each other in drafts. But just because, you know, if any rookie is going to just dominate, have a breakout season, it's probably one of those two. And so we want to be talking about one of them. My lean right now, I guess the one that I am most excited about is Treylon Burks. It comes down to I trust Ryan Tannehill more than Marcus Mariota, right? And honestly, if it goes to the backups, like that's the starting quarterbacks, but if both of the backups are playing, I trust Malik Willis more than I trust Desmond Ridder. So in both scenarios, I just lean towards the Titans. And so that's kind of where the lean is there. Also, I just love the talent of Treylon Burks. He is a physical freak, and he's a guy that they can just get the ball quickly on screen passes, just design plays, get him the ball, and he will do a ton after the catch. Fantastic athlete. I think he's going to be really, really good in that offense. And also, they're so heavily invested in him. Like, this can't fail, right? Like, they can't just go out in training camp and be like, oh, we don't really like this kid. We're not going to use him that much, right? They gave up A.J. Brown to get him. They already look dumb making this move. Like, just not signing A.J. Brown to a long-term deal is atrocious, right? So everyone is on them for just being a terrible move. The only way they can really end up justifying it is if Burks ends up being really good and a productive member of the offense that they can have for multiple seasons, right? Because they basically just didn't want to extend A.J. Brown, at least at the money that he wanted. The only way they can get around that is if Burks works out. And so they're going to really force the balls at him, you have to think. And you also consider what's his, competition. It's a, nearly 30-year-old Robert Woods coming off a torn ACL. It's Nick Westbrook, Ekine. You guys know I can't say his last name, but, Nick Westbrook, not fantastic. Kyle Phillips, who actually is getting some good reports out of camp. I like him, but he's a smaller wide receiver, right? He's like 5'11", around 180, while Burks is 6'2", 224. So they're not really competing for the same role in the offense. So I think that you can like Kyle Phillips as like another rookie on this team that could produce if, Woods and Nick just don't really do anything, but they're not competing for the same role, right? And there's just so much volume gone because A.J. Brown's no longer on the team. Again, that's not to say that like Drake London, he's got a ton of competition, right? It's the same thing for him. I'm just saying between these two, I trust the passers on the Titans more than I trust, the combination of Desmond Ridder and Marcus Mariota. Like I don't trust those two to do anything. We do need to watch camp just to make sure that Treylon Burks is not Laviska Shenault. I've seen a lot of people talk about being like, hey, this could be a thing. Like, he's kind of that same type of mold of receiver. Maybe he's just going to be a bust. I highly doubt that's the case. We have camp, right? It's May right now. We have plenty of time to determine if Burks is going to be a bust. I think that's a very low likelihood outcome, but it's something we should at least consider. After him in the ADPs, we had Skyy Moore, who I also think is a really solid pick. Again, not a player that I think is coming in here and is like, 20 wide receiver spots undervalued, right? Like, he's coming in at, what I say, wide receiver 40, around there. I think that's roughly correct. I believe I have him a little bit ahead of this, so as a slight value. And as I said, in the Saturday video, I expected going into the offseason for Skyy Moore to be a really late round pick right now, and then to have his ADP climb through June, through July, and then peak in August. That's what I expected. And so it is a little concerning to see that he's already going really, really early in drafts, right? Because it's pretty unlikely that his ADP just craters, unless he gets injured or unless, reports come out that he's going to be the fifth wide receiver or something, which, I guess we can't predict injuries, but it's pretty unlikely he comes out fully healthy as his fifth best wide receiver, right? So I'm thinking right now, his ADP is totally fine. It's just a little bit concerning being on this offense saying, oh, what if it climbs to 30? Now it's not a value. So understand that this is at ADP 40. I think he's a really good pick. As he moves ahead of that, I start to be like, let's pump the brakes a little bit just because we don't know a lot of this offense. But I would just say as a blanket statement, if you were someone who really wants to find who is the wide receiver on Kansas City to target, I don't want Juju at his ADP. I think it's way too early. And I don't really think MVS, and I don't really believe in Hardman at all. I mean, Hardman's been given opportunities in the past, and he can never do anything with it. So I don't understand why this season all of a sudden he would break out. But I just don't believe in the other talents they have in this offense. And I do believe that Skyy Moore is a very talented young prospect. And again, he's playing with Patrick Mahomes. You don't have to be a god to produce in fantasy. None of these guys are going to end up being wide receiver ones. But in terms of who's going to beat their ADP more, or at least be more valuable, because some of these later guys can beat their ADP but still not be valuable, I think Skyy Moore is the one that we want on this team. So again, expect his ADP to go up at ADP right now. I think he's a good pick. Next up in ADP, Chris Olave. And he is becoming more and more interesting to me as we get more news on Michael Thomas. This was just not something I was expecting, right? I assumed, right, that pretty much any human with 2 years to recover from an ankle injury was going to be good to go. I really thought there was no chance in the world that Michael Thomas was not going to be okay this season. But the only reports we have right now are that maybe he's not going to be. And that is not baked into Chris Olave's ADP right now. The ADP currently is assuming Michael Thomas is fine. Maybe that he's not what he used to be, right? But that he's, 90-95% healthy, that he's taken a minor step back being 29 years old right now. Not that, he's not fully recovered, which is what it seems to be at the moment. If you're not fully recovered at this point, what is going to happen between now and week one? You've had 2 years to recover and you haven't done it yet. It's a very weird situation. There's got to be some more reporting on this. We're going to see what happens when camp fully gets going, right? But it's concerning. And I think if you're drafting right now, nobody's taking into account that Olave could legitimately be the one. Now, I know they did sign on Jarvis Landry, so now they have Jarvis Landry, Olave, they've got Michael Thomas. So it's there is the downside risk that Michael Thomas is good and Landry's still good. And it's Olave doesn't have the target share, but just maybe. So everyone was making fun of them for how much they gave up to get Olave, right? They traded picks 98, 101, 120, a 2023 first, and a 2024 second just to get Olave, which is absurd. That's way, way, way too much just to get your wide receiver. But maybe in the back of their minds, they were okay, they don't know. Maybe they're just not sure on the health of Michael Thomas. And if that is the case, that's why they did this. And they're planning for Olave to be their one. That's a lot of upside in what is still a really good offense. I mean, I think they're going to be lower volume than we like, run the ball more than we'd like, but it's still good offense, right? It's one that you can say, okay, I'm comfortable playing players from this offense, whereas you've got other offenses might, run more plays, but they're just not good. Saints are going to be good, especially if Winston can get healthy. There's upside. There's absolutely upside there. I think if you're going to assume that he's not 100% healthy, talking about Michael Thomas there, really good pick, and Chris Olave. So that's 3 of the top 4 I'm including in our top 5 wide receivers target. So only got 2 left. The next 2 by ADP are, remember, Garrett Wilson and Christian Watson. I am not going to include them as top targets. I think that Wilson is a perfectly fine pick, but I'm not fully convinced, talking about bad offenses, I'm not fully convinced that Zach Wilson isn't terrible. Like, he might just be terrible. I'm not saying he is, but I'm not saying he isn't, right? I'm not fully convinced he's a good quarterback. And I am convinced that Elijah Moore is a good wide receiver. And so if there's a chance that Wilson's terrible, and I'm not even convinced that, like, I'm talking about obviously Zach Wilson there, and I'm not convinced that Garrett Wilson is better than Elijah Moore, you might have the second best wide receiver on a team with a terrible quarterback. And it's not something I really want to target. So because of that, I see a cap to his ceiling, and so not in love with it. And then I just think that, like, we just need more information on Christian Watson. I think his ADP right now is assuming that he's got a really, really solid role on the offense. And I don't think, I think he can have a solid role in the offense, but I don't think we should just assume that he's like the guy. I think they have other players that will still get looks. And I think that, Romeo Doubs, like, what's his status on the team, right? They still have Lazard. They could still spread the ball. They still have Tunyon coming back. They still have the running backs they're going to use. Like, they still have people. And then there's still free agents. There is still that possibility that a free agent comes to the team, like happened, with Jarvis Landry going to New Orleans, and that can kind of muddy the water. So until we get a lot more clarity, I don't really want to call Christian Watson, a target here, because I think he's seen a lot of hype and not much resistance as far as the negative is concerned. I do feel, though, that the next wide receiver in ADP is a good value. And that's Jameson Williams. Now, it was pretty widely agreed by experts that, like, he was going to be the top wide receiver in the draft class had he not torn his ACL. Now, he obviously did, and so that's why he wasn't taken as early, and we need to account for that he tore his ACL, right? But he's a really, really good receiver, and every report that we have about his recovery says it's going really well and that he should be good to go. And I'm thinking that his current ADP is assuming that he's going to miss time, not only miss time, but be kind of slow to recover. So people are basically assuming that he's going to miss a lot of camp, that he's going to potentially miss games, and then even in the games when he comes back, he's going to start slow. So you're really only going to have him in the second half. I think that's what his ADP just assumes is going to happen. And I think that could happen. But I think there's absolutely a possibility that, he's recovering really well, he'll still get some run in camp, and then he could be good to go to start the season. And also, if you're wrong on that, or if I'm wrong on that, who cares, right? We're at the wide receiver 54. Who cares if you can't start him until week 7? You shouldn't be starting the 54th wide receiver off the board until that late in the season. Now, maybe you end up drafting a few busts and you kind of need him in week 4, week 5, or maybe there's some injuries, you get really unlucky, but for a fact you're not starting him in week 1, week 2, week 3, so you can take that chance. And why not take a chance on a guy who, again, was the consensus best wide receiver in the draft class? That's a lot of upside. Again, wide receiver 54. Also, I just like the offense. I'm going to probably be annoying with how much I say I like the Lions offense. I used to be annoying with how much I said I hated them when they had Patricia as their head coach because he's just horrendous. But they have much, much better coaching. They have really good coaching now. They have players who can produce. They seem to be putting together a really good quality team, good playmakers around just a fine, Goff is just a fine quarterback. I just think you have that combination of really good speed on the team, really good playmakers on the team, and really quality coaching and play calling that I trust this offense, and I want explosive playmakers on this offense. Who's more explosive than Jameson Williams? So really, really good pick there. After that, I would say Dotson and Bell. I think they're perfectly fine picks of their ADP, but nothing's really standing out to me there. McLaurin has clearly had a Dotson, though if you think Carson Wentz is going to elevate this offense, maybe you want to go there. Bell obviously has the ground game, the running back is going to be used heavily in Cleveland. Plus, Amari Cooper's clearly ahead of him. Plus, there's just that unknown of how long Watson's going to be suspended for. So a lot more ambiguity in his situation. So again, perfectly fine picks, but I don't want to call them values right now. So that leaves us one more to feature in this video for our top 5. And it's going to be someone who you can just take in the final pick of your draft. To me, I think the best options are either Jalen Tolbert or Wan'Dale Robinson. So I'll just include both of them. I think both of them are just quality picks. If you want to just assume your last round pick is going to be one of those two, one of them gets taken, take the other one. I don't really think there's a whole lot separating these two. But there's really two schools of thought as well. So I kind of left it open to what you think, right? If you think that you're better off just taking someone on the better offense, right, with the better quarterback play, well, Dallas obviously has a better quarterback with Dak over Daniel Jones, and then obviously they're just a better offense overall. And so if you think that's the most important thing is just securing a player who's good on a good offense because maybe they can ascend and be great, I would go with Tolbert, right? Especially because, they lost Amari Cooper. They've got Michael Gallup recovering from the torn ACL. Like, there's opportunity here, right? And as of right now, I had Tolbert projected to see only 11% of the Cowboys' targets. That's not a crazy number, 11%. Only 10% of the passing touchdowns, I guess receiving touchdowns, right? That ranks him as the wide receiver 64, which is like 15 spots ahead of his ADP. So he's a good pick, regardless of what you think. And I didn't even give him that much of the target share. But I want to just say that, like, even if you're in that camp, I think, worst case for Wan'Dale is that he's also shattering his ADP. Now, again, it's last pick. Shattering ADP at that point doesn't mean as much. But you've got, Tony on the trade block. You've got Sterling Shepard being 29 years old, coming off a torn Achilles. You've got Golladay, who hasn't gone over 525 receiving yards since 2019. You've no longer got Evan Ingram on the team. Like, who do they have, right? They have a lot of people, but who do they trust? No one. So when you look and they spend an early to mid second round pick on Robinson, they're assuming he's someone who can immediately contribute. And they're assuming they have a game plan for him. Like, they could have drafted Mechie, they could have drafted Pickens, Alec Pierce, Skyy Moore, David Bell. Like, all those guys were still on the board. And those are good receiving talents, good prospects. So them to just skip over that group and grabbing a playmaker in Wan'Dale, you have to think they're using him. And if they have a role for him, he's a very electric player. He can be really good. What if they trade away Tony? What if Sterling Shepard isn't good to go? The target share is going to be there, and this is a team that we think is going to throw the ball a ton this season. I'm projected right now 19% target share, 13% target share, 19 spots undervalued. That's a really good value. So those are my 5, or I guess 6 favorite rookies to draft right now in redraft leagues, taking their ADP into account. I might make an update video on this later in the summer since ADPs are going to change plenty. But if you always want to stay up to date on my latest thoughts on not only these players, but every single draftable player and how they compare to the current ADPs, you can always do that by looking at my rankings for every scoring format and every league size on our website, thefantasyfootballadvice.com. That, my friends, is the end of this one. Hope you all did enjoy. If you did, how about hitting a like button? And how about subscribing to the channel if you're new here? Thanks for watching.